All right, so that Pokemon video did a lot better than I anticipated. I anticipated 5 views, and I got like what 500, over 500. Happy for that. To some people, that's small, but to me, that's a lot. Thank you for everyone that pulled up. Thank you for everyone that commented, be it the sane comments, the neutral comments, and even I don't think I got like super insane comments, like comments where people were threatening, making any threats or telling people to do certain things to themselves if they enjoyed the game. And for that, thank you. Now, today I want to talk about old games, new games, and the topic of on the topic of bugs and glitches because it really feels like a lot of people are just over exaggerating the quality of games that released back then and versus now, and it's a little insane, especially for people like me that grew up around the time where like if you had a PS2 or a GameCube or whatnot in your crib, people wanted to come over and play those. That's how crazy this was. I saw people playing. I had a Game Boy, the Advanced SP, the little foldable one. I I had a DS. I had the Xbox 360. Um, didn't even hear of the Xbox, the original Xbox, until the 360 was out for a bit, and I saw someone bring it up and had Mortal Kombat on it. I didn't really know anyone aside from that one guy with an Xbox, original Xbox. I'm not gonna downplay the staying power that Halo had for that thing. Like it pushed people to buy an Xbox. So um, yeah, I got to see games of the sixth generation era, and I'm getting to see games now. And actually, I think I got to see some like fifth because I kind of grew up with older consoles that were out before I was even born. So like either way, I got to see games, older era, current era, and everything in between. And I have got to say, we got to be honest with ourselves, because everyone's like, game developers knew that once a game hit store shelves, that was it. There was no more fixing, and therefore they just made games good off bat. Not always. Like sure, game developers they had that the bigger pressure to finish a game instead of just having to rely on like day one support. But to say that was always the case is a little funny because we all grew up playing at least one or two buggy games in our PS2 collection. PS2 is the home of incomplete Sonic ports. Like, let's just be honest with ourselves. And we played them, have fun with them, you know? And I guess a difference between like playing a buggy game as an adult versus playing a buggy game as a kid, for the most part, for everybody that this applies to, you just kind of grew up with your parents buying the games and then started to notice things differently when you bought it yourself. Some people um, saved up their own money to buy these consoles and games on their own with allowance. That's also a thing. But for the most part, I feel like as a kid, saving up money to buy these things and it was just easier to have fun because like even if it was a bad game, like there are so many games that I have played on my 360 or DS or PS2 that looking at it today, yes, it does suck. But as a kid, it was fun. Why? Probably because that was all I had. Like it was like either you play the games you got for Christmas, take the good and the bad with it, or you just play nothing. You know, that was it. Because I didn't have a job. I didn't have my own source of income other than an allowance at a very inconsistent rate. um, so this just there's just so many games that released back then that were also rough, but I feel like we just kind of moved on because there were also other games that released, and it was like, okay, um, Squanchville 2 released as a hot mess, but there's also a new Need for Speed, so I guess I'll just get that one and call it a day, you know, whatever. there's there's also no defending current games that release in such horrendous states. Like, for example, Cyberpunk 2077 is much of a dead horse that is to be this the easiest examples. I don't really have examples of older titles that were buggy off the top of my head. They're there. If I research it, it's there. But this is just a topic that I just wanted to ramble on right quick before a morning walk run. Um, Games like Cyberpunk 2077 releasing today, they end up depending on day one support, and even in that case, they depend on fans just coping for them. People when that game released, people were like, "Oh, why did you guys expect this to run on the base 2013 versions of these consoles? Why wouldn't I? It says it on the box." They could have easily just said PS4 Pro only or PS5 only, but no, they released it as a PS4 game, Xbox One game. Therefore, it should be able to run on the system that it is being advertised to sell on. And then later on, it was patched, it was fixed. Um, People also tried to defend it by saying, well, the PC port wasn't that bad, so it's all that should matter, right? And it's like, no, it should. Same sentiment with Switch games, some of those Switch ports. If it's advertised to run on that system, it should run. Otherwise, just don't do it, you know? Games back then, I really feel like when a game was bad, we just kind of moved on. Nowadays, if a game's bad, you could really just make a YouTube career out of it, and it's really insane. Like when Destiny 2, for example, when that released, a hot mess. There were certain YouTubers that really blew up after that because it was so easy because they just kept making mistakes left and right, and it was so easy to just make a new video, and it's so easy to just stay on that because why move on to a new game when this is trending? I think this is also why bad games just stay in cycle more than they used to. Back then, I don't really think you would remember a bad game like unless it was so bad that you like you spent your well no if you like spent your allowance and or anticipated it as a Christmas gift and you were like this game's gonna be so amazing, it's gonna be great, and it ended up being a dumpster fire, you will probably remember it. But otherwise, I don't really remember many bad games off the top of my head that I played as a kid, probably except for this one bad Naruto PS2 game. I mean, not PS2, bad Naruto PSP game. I don't even remember the title of it. All I remember is I wanted Storm Heroes, whatever the whatever the good PS PSP Naruto game was that had a huge roster of characters. I wanted that one. The one that I got was I don't remember. Let me see if I can find it. All right, I finally. I think I found the the one that I played first was Naruto Legends Akatsuki's Rising, and the one that I wanted, the one that I saw on the trail, like saw on the GameStop website, and was like, yeah, I want this game. Was Naruto Ultimate Ninja Heroes 3. But when I went to the store, I guess I mixed it up because that was the only Naruto game I saw there, and then I played it, and I was like, well, this is kind of crap, but kept playing. Because again, it's all you get for a while. And then I finish it and see what's all there because I'm still coping in my head like there's got to be more here in this game. There's got to be. And then later on, I fully finish it and it didn't have Pain or any other characters I had there. I got to play a Sasuke. That was fun, but it was still a crap game. But yeah, overall, that's probably like one of the few games that I played as a kid that I knew was crap, and and they ended up sticking with me. Other than that, I kind of forgot other ones because you just kind of move on, especially when back then it was also really cheap to get games, especially from GameStop around the holidays. You could get like you were you could walk into GameStop back then and just walk out. You could walk in with $20 and walk out with like a good 5 to 6 games. That's just how great it was at the time. I mean, used of course, but at the time that didn't really matter, especially for cartridge games. Sometimes you get to see where the last person gave up at, and go like, okay, yeah, this guy sucked. It's a skill issue. I got this next time. That was pretty much me with Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Darkness one. I thought I had that Primal Dialga. I'm like, okay, this guy stopped at Primal Dialga. What a pussy! I got that, and then I get my butt kicked. I finished it later as an adult, but man, um, but back to the main point. I feel like my theory, and you can tell me I'm wrong. My theory is that the reason why things were a bit different with glitchy games is that um, we were younger. It was whatever, and sometimes it didn't really make the game unplayable. Like you were still able to beat the game. There were some PC games around that time that were you could not finish them. And people still remember some of them fondly. They're just like, hey, just run this mod, and it's still the best game ever. But nowadays, a game has like one glitch, and sometimes people are just ready to tear that game apart. And it's like, all right, it's not that serious. Everyone's calm down. But this this still isn't in defense of games with like really bad launches. This is just more of a hey, we're kind of overdoing. I know we're doing this in some regard. Like, yeah, some games deserve their hate. Some games are just kind of not that bad. They just have a few bugs. But I still have issues when some people are ready to forgive some games because they got good a year later. I'm not the biggest fan of that, if I'm being honest. Like, hey, this game's great and it's the greatest game ever. Yeah, all you have to do is just spend $60 and wait a whole year. Or spend $60, refund the game, buy it again on sale, and then regardless, you're still waiting a year. So, like, don't like that. um, I guess cost is also like the thing. Like, there was just straight up more money going around in certain time periods than there are like right now. So people are quick to go like, oh well, it was blank price and blank era, but like yeah, but think about how much money was moving around. And also think about all the better deals there were at the point. Like people are quick to bring up old screenshots of magazines with Nintendo games being 80, 90, $100. But you could go to other stores and there were just straight up better deals there. Nowadays, everywhere is kind of 60, 70, 70 really, trying to creep into $80 territory. And it's like, all right, let's slow down a little bit. Like, things are getting a little bit too expensive around here. And it's really funny because I remember years ago, like a, a decade ago, people were like, oh, gaming is one of the cheapest hobbies. And then it kind of went out the window, and people started being like, "Oh, well, it's okay because gaming's one of the more expensive hobbies." And it's like, why are we collectively just shifting over and just being cool with that? But I think I might do another video on video games, old versus new, but it'll probably be MMO because I think with that one there's a lot more to say. But I feel like with this, I don't know. I just feel like there's not too much to say. Like feel like on one hand, people I know over exaggerate. On the other hand, there's enough justified anger in some of these, but also some people just go like, "Oh, well, games back then were complete," and it's like I disagree. Like there were quite a handful of games back then that you you didn't get the complete edition unless you got like a director's cut that would oftentimes release on a different console. So you would have game release on PS2, and then they come out and go like, "Hey, here's a director's cut with all new content, whatever." And some of those content would just make the game feel much more complete, but that's only on GameCube for some reason. So now it's like, how do I finish this? Um, Expansions existed back then too, but that was more so a PC thing or a relaunch thing. Like some games just had full blown re releases, and you just had to buy it if you wanted to see the rest of the story or other editions. Um, PC, you just had to buy a new disc and download that stuff, and boom, new content. But that didn't really. Some companies were still even greedy back then, especially EA when it came to Sims. Man, Sims 3 got to see it all. So I think I think that's about it. I think that's all there is to really say about this topic. Other than that, yeah, there were deluxe editions back then. No, there were director's cuts back then, and I guess the deluxe editions, and so to speak, would just be versions re-released later down the road. But sometimes it will be those will be for different systems. It was a really weird time. Speaking of weird time, it was kind of also like that if you just wanted to play Kingdom Hearts, but that's a whole other thing. So I don't know. This is just me rambling again. But what do you guys think? Anyone that made it this far and want to comment? What do you guys think? Have Do you also see it the way I see it, where there were also buggy games back then, but we just kind of forgot about them and moved on? Like I guess well, there was just one buggy game that released that kind of created a whole mess, and that was ET Atari. Which, yeah. But other than that, I feel like the quality was still all over the place, but at the same time, um, a bit more controlled after a point because it got to a point where like you couldn't release your game on certain consoles unless you met with the company and they had tighter restrictions. Nowadays, that restrictions don't really exist. There's e-waste on the eShop, PlayStation Store. There's AI games. I boot up my PlayStation 5, check PSN. There's AI games now. It's a mess. So maybe that's also a thing. Um, Games just There's a bit more of a control over what released on what consoles. Like there's still a filter, but it's yeah. Uh, like I guess a classic example of a game that was rushed and was not a complete game was Sonic 3 and games of that caliber because they really wanted that game out by the holiday season for a McDonald's deal. So people had to go back out and buy the N Knuckles version alongside buying the upgrade just to get it to run. And that was I say all this to say we're kind of not that like some of the some of the shady plays happening today are were happening back then. Like nothing happening now is new. I would argue. I guess the only new thing is just that like instead of just having to um, cut some content that's not working, you just release that content anyway, and you're like, yeah, well, hey, we'll start working on that day one patch as soon as this game hits shelves. And it's like, why do that? Just delay. I don't really understand release dates and why, but I'm not gonna let this video be too long. So yeah, see ya.